Hey, my name is Victor, and this is Cloud Therapist channel.
Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist Shorts. I'm Richard Simon. Today we're talking all about GitOps. So we're going to have hopefully the start of a short series and talking all about GitOps. We're going to be focusing on what is GitOps, maybe do hopefully a demonstration of GitOps and see that actually up and running, and also talk about some best practices in one of the later episodes as well. Let me introduce my guest for today, who is Victor. Victor is a developer advocate at Upbound, and also Victor runs his own YouTube channel called the DevOps Toolkit. Yeah, let's do a quick hello to Victor, and then let's get things going. How you doing, Victor?
Hey, always good. You know,
always good.
Today everything is about immutable state, right? So I reached the state I want, and now I'm not changing it.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on to do this, and hopefully we're going to have some fun, kind of just talking about GitOps and things like that. So before we kick off, I just kind of want to remind the viewers to please check out all the other videos on my channel. Subscribe if you haven't. That will really help me out to kind of create some more content. Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, let's get on with that. So Victor, let's start kind of with a quick definition. What is GitOps?
Oh, it's hard actually to define it, right? Because in some form or another, we had GitOps or version control based state for decades, right? Most of us knew that we need to keep stuff in Git, right? So GitOps by itself is not really that new. What is new is that we finally have a definition about the process and what it means truly to be what we call today GitOps, right? So it is based on 4 principles, and those 4 principles I'm going to say are extremely important because many people will say, hey, this is GitOps, that is GitOps, GitHub Actions, GitOps, right? There is the word Git, or absolutely not true, right? So 4 principles. It needs to be declarative. It needs to be versioned and immutable. That's Git. It needs to be pulled automatically. It cannot be pushed. And it needs to be continuously reconciled, right? If those 4 principles are fulfilled, you're doing GitOps, or the tool you're using is doing GitOps. Now, the tricky part is that, and I can stake my claim in this. I can bet in anything you want. There are only 3 tools in the market, in the world, that can be called GitOps. It's argocd, Flux, and Rancher Fleet. Right. That's it, right? And all 3 of them are Kubernetes controllers running in Kubernetes. So there is no way around it. You cannot do GitOps without using Kubernetes. Right. And now the important thing to understand is that we have 2 states. The desired state, this is what I want to have. That's Git, right? It's not, some people call it the source of truth. It is not the source of truth of anything. It is the source of expression of the desires. I want this. And then we have the actual state. That's your cluster, servers, applications. That's something really running. That's the real source of truth.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So kind of why do we actually, why do we need GitOps? Can we not just get on with DevOps and infrastructure as code? Why do we need kind of more complication?
So one does not exclude the other, really. If I would say, why do we need GitOps instead of, and then the word after that would be, why do we use GitOps instead of executing some commands ourselves manually or through pipelines, right? So from your laptop to accomplish kind of similar result, end result, you would execute kubectl apply or Helm install, right? Or from your pipelines, from GitHub Actions, from Jenkins, whatever you're using, you would run those same commands as part of the pipelines, right? Now, the difference between that, actually, there are quite a few differences, right? First of all, it's push-based model. That means that you need to enable access. You need to allow me to access the cluster to be able to do that. That's extremely insecure, right? And doesn't matter whether it's to me or to some other tool. It's insecure for no good reason to allow me to access production cluster, right? Pool-based mechanism avoids that because there is a process running there, right?
Yeah.
And there is a story about continuously reconciled, right? If I push something to Git now and I execute some command one way or another and say, do this, do that, and things happen at that very moment, and nothing will happen from there on until the next time you push something to Git.
Sure.
GitOps is about one of those 4 principles, continuous reconciliation, meaning that I will make sure that those 2 states, what is the desired state in Git and the actual state, are always the same. If tomorrow meteorite hits the data center, I will make sure that it continues running, right?
Sure.
So continuous reconciliation, that's a huge difference. Massive.
Sure. Right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So it's I think the pull aspect of it, I think, is probably the main difference. And as you said, I think the tools will also run agents in your Kubernetes cluster as well, right? To make sure that that state is always there. Excellent. Okay.
So think of it as operator, human operator.
Yeah.
You know, the person who is constantly watching monitor dashboards.
Yes.
And whenever something wrong happens, that person goes and fixes it.
Yeah.
And now imagine that not being a person, but process continuously monitoring the states, doing your job.
Yeah. So I mean, in the old data center days and my systems management days, I used to very, very familiar with events and alerts. So yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So we kind of definitely need something that, you know, sort of looks after that sort of infrastructure as code and does that process properly. So we've kind of done it with DevOps, and now we're, I guess, looking at it from a infrastructure as code sort of process. We don't, you know, we shouldn't have our Ansible and Terraform scripts running on our laptops, and then from there we kind of do the, you know, do the execution from that point.
Yeah, laptop should be denied access to anything, right? It's for development, cool, we use it.
Yeah.
The point of the story that goes way beyond GitOps, right, process is that I do whatever I do, I write code, I run tests, I do whatever I do, I push to Git, and that's when my job is finished. There is nothing for me to do after that, right? Everything else, building images, building binaries, running tests, deploying somewhere, that's all done by different tools, right?
Sure.
And in order for those tools to do the job, we need to be able to tell those tools what we want.
Yeah.
And that's where infrastructure as code comes. That's where different types of states. It could be Ansible. It could be many, many different tools. But we need those tools that understand what we described and translate it to reality, right?
Sure. Okay, so let's talk kind of a little bit about how is it going to fit in. So we've kind of already have a DevOps pipeline. So are we kind of looking at these tools as sort of fitting in with that, or are they kind of just have their own sort of pipeline, so to speak?
So you can think of GitOps as changing or eliminating one of the steps in a traditional pipeline, right? So if I'm going to go in a very high level and, you know, without going into details, but traditionally, if you use Jenkins or whatever you're using in your pipeline, you would check out the code, you would build something, you would run some tests, and you would deploy something somewhere, right?
Sure.
I'm simplifying it. I know it's not that simple, but let's say it's that simple, right?
Yeah.
Now, the deployment part changes. I'm still building, I'm still running tests, I'm still doing everything I'm doing, but instead of my pipelines deploying something somewhere, they're actually pushing some changes to Git, and those changes are saying, hey, you know, here where I defined that it should be version 7 of my application, now I'm saying that I want version 8.
Right.
And the major difference is that from pipelines, you execute whichever command you run to change something somewhere, it's unknown what change was done, how it was done, when it was done. So instead of you from pipelines or wherever changing the states, the actual state somehow, you say, no, I'm going to store it in Git so that everybody knows what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do, you know, all the good things.
Yeah.
So that's the change, I think, in a pipeline. We do not deploy directly. We change the state in Git. And then there are some other tools like argocd that will detect that change and do the heavy lifting.
Right. So,
But the rest stays the same, right?
Right.
Building, testing, stuff like
exactly. That. Yeah. So potentially then it kind of slight changes to kind of how we do the DevOps piece. And the yeah, if you kind of mentioned those tools, so those would be the ones to evaluate then if we kind of want to play with DevOps and that rather with GitOps and so on. So fluxcd, argocd. So where does kind of just briefly, where does Crossplane come into that?
Okay, so if all the tools that do GitOps today, without now discussing whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, they're all designed to manage Kubernetes resources. 100%, right? So they all assume that you are going to, that there's going to synchronize something from Git into a Kubernetes cluster, and then Kubernetes cluster knows what to do with that, right?
Right.
And if you take a simplest possible approach, that's telling something to Kubernetes cluster ends up your application running as containers in Kubernetes cluster. Now, if you want to expand that and say, hey, if you're going to use GitOps to manage not only applications running in containers in my clusters, but maybe Lambda functions, maybe databases in AWS, maybe clusters, maybe servers, you know, whatever we have, then the way to solve that is to say, okay, I'm going to teach Kubernetes how to do all those things by adding it additional resources. I'm going to teach Kubernetes how to manage EC2 instances.
Right.
Once we do that, then GitOps continues working. It's just with a much wider scope.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So Crossplane, from certain perspective, expands the scope of Kubernetes to something infinitely wider.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I did a talk about supercloud recently, so maybe Crossplane might be the start or the core of that sort of solution. Excellent. Okay. So what's kind of so we kind of talked about, you know, sort of it's I think it was mentioned in a video I watched. It's doing infrastructure as code kind of correctly. It's the correct way to do infrastructure as code with GitOps, and we're kind of bringing that sort of discipline and that sort of process that we've had in DevOps to the kind of the infrastructure as code sort of camp, if you like. Okay, so what's kind of the next steps? How do we start kind of looking at GitOps? What would be an easy way to do that?
I mean, I think that right now we're in that expansion phase, how we can expand GitOps beyond very, very narrow focus that it had in the past. And I think that it will take us probably as industry probably a year or two more until kind of that scope expanded. After that, we'll probably need to start looking into some of the current deficiency of GitOps, really, especially how can the tools that are doing whatever they're doing, how they can report back to Git, right?
Right.
Because like if you do blue-green deployment, just to say something on any type of progressive delivery, and I'm using it only as an example, it really clashes with the concepts of GitOps because it is changing constantly the state somewhere. Yes. So I think that we will have to probably work on how to resolve those conflicts between principles of GitOps and other tools, other processes doing random stuff.
Okay. Right. So, and briefly, if somebody wants to have a go at that, is it just kind of, do we just go and get a distribution of one of these tools and play with that? And what's kind of the easiest entry point into sort of that GitOps world?
The first step is probably certain level of familiarity with Kubernetes, because they're all Kubernetes-based operators, controllers, and stuff like that. Assuming that that's handled, it's actually extremely simple. And I think that that's the huge appeal with GitOps. Assuming that you installed one of those tools, let's say argocd or Flux, all you have to do is create 10 lines of YAML instructing that tool by saying, this is the repository, this is the directory, and that's the cluster, or clusters in plural, where I want to have whatever is in that repository, right? So it's like 10 lines of YAML, and everything else stays the same.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
All you have to do is to say, to inform the tool how to find the information it needs to find. That's about it.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Victor. I really appreciate your insights. This is going to be hopefully a very interesting and fascinating series of short talks that we're going to do. Hopefully we'll move on to talking a little bit more about Crossplane and maybe kind of do a GitOps demo as well. that would be quite cool to do. Yeah. So thank you everybody for for watching this. I'll include some links in the description of the video, all the kind of links for Victor's channel and kind of all his blogs and stuff like that will be in the description. Yeah, that's it. Thanks very much, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this talk, then please choose to subscribe to the channel, and see you next time. Cheers.